I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today I am going to play with a Dharma acid dye that actually isn't available anymore. Occasionally, Dharma releases what they call Muck dyes, and these are dyes that I hypothesize were born out of a mistake when mixing one of their other premixed colors. Maybe they accidentally dumped in too much pigment or they used the wrong pigment, and so it wasn't the color they were trying to create, but it's now something that is unique, that has no recorded recipe, and so they release it under this Muck label. So the dye we're going to play with today is actually a Muck green that I believe was released in 2019. It didn't have any other name assigned to it, but everyone has told me that this is a gorgeous color and someone decided to share it with me. So today we're going to take a first look at this color.
And here is the Muck green dye. Ooh, it looks really pigmented. The powder is really, really dark. I bet that this is going to be extremely pigmented. Since we are playing with an acid dye powder, I will be wearing a respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves whenever I am actively using the powders. For our first look, we are going to dye 100 grams of Knit Pick Stroll fingering weight yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. I'm going to adjust enough water to cover it. So I think I've added approximately 4 cups of water. This is enough that you can see we have plenty of water on the bottom, but we've got yarn at the surface, which is good for sort of speckling first look. I have a feeling we'll end up creating some kind of tonal here with this first try, but we'll at least see what speckling does at first. If you'd like to learn more about any of the tools or equipment I use for dyeing yarn, you can find links down in the video description.
I almost forgot. I need to add some acid. So I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of white vinegar, and we are going to move the yarn around to sort of distribute it, and I will get the tongs to re-spread it out. Oh dear. Okay, so I noticed something. I don't know if you can really see on camera, there is a hint of some blue on this yarn. I used this pan for a ChemKnits dye-along live stream last night, and it's possible that I hadn't actually washed this pan yet before I started filming. Maybe I thought that I had washed it, but maybe I just emptied it and didn't finish rinsing it. So some amount of residual pale blue, which really there isn't much. I see another spot on here, but that was not from the Muck green.
I debated back and forth between starting with speckling with my fingertips, but I think I'm actually going to take up my spoon, grab a little bit of powder, and apply this. So I see, this is a gorgeous color. So the pale area is very minty, very, very minty. I did see as it was going down some yellow pigments, but now let's speckle and try not to get liquid. So I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of the powder, and I am letting it fall. Going over like half of it just to see what we see. Let's see if I see a bunch of different colors. It looks like there could be some blues. I'm just using up the rest of what I have in my fingers. Tapping that on. It's a gorgeous color. I cannot tell yet if I'm seeing breaking or if I'm seeing bluer green and greener green like teal and then more green speckles. Okay, I do see a little bit of some yellow in some spots. I think it might be breaking. So up here, I do see a little yellow pigment that maybe isn't showing up on camera. It's very subtle. I do think I see some more blue speckles and more green speckles and little bits of yellow. Yeah, like some of these specks have almost a yellowish halo and some feel more blue. It is very, very beautiful, but I think I'm gonna give everything 10 minutes to sit because that should give things time to sort of sit, maybe spread, and then we'll see what they look like.
Undeniably, we've got some areas that feel very blue. There are yellowish halos, almost lime green halos around some of them, and then I see sort of like a grass green and a teal. On this area where I sort of applied the color, I feel like I see a little bit of breaking in there with a little bit more blue and yellow in areas. It is hard to say definitively, but I think it is a very pretty color. What I don't know though is if, ooh, see some of that blue spread out. That's cool. Because I was like, I'm not sure if some of this green would stick around, but that is really, really pretty. And it has definitely struck already. Now let's go ahead and speed things up. I am planning on applying the speckles all over, sometimes touching things and letting it spread. My goal is to have sort of a speckly, almost tonal kind of territory. I do want some more like bigger splotches of color to sort of go along with what we have here, but we'll sort of see where the color wants us to go. I applied the dye really heavily all over and continued to see those yellowish, bluish, and medium green type speckles. And in some areas where I sort of tapped the yarn with my fingers, because I don't have a yarn mop, so I'm using this as my yarn mop, and the colors really do appear to break, which is really exciting and means that I should look at a dip dyeing attempt to break colors to see how this particular muck green performs. I think I might leave it here because I think that the coverage that I got overall is really, really good. There is unquestionably greener green and tealer green patches. So you can see some of those more yellow green areas. I feel like when I dyed the yarn with sea spray to sort of test that color that I'd heard would be tricky, and I'm just adding 4 more cups of water. But I feel like in that other video, I saw multiple colors with the speckling that I did. But then when it came time to see the finished yarn, I didn't see that. But when it came to the finished yarn, maybe I didn't see that anymore. So we'll see if I see these differences as much when it's dry. I don't think the yellow detracts from it. I do think that it's just very, very pretty and interesting. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this sit for, I think, 15 more minutes. And then we'll turn off the heat to let it cool so we can wash it. Let's wash the speckled yarn. I do definitely see blue patches, green, and then you can see some more yellow. So I think that these different colored specks are a little more prominent than in sea spray maybe. Overall, the color is very lovely and does remind me of sea spray a fair amount. I should do a side-by-side at some point. Not that you could buy this color, but I'm just, in general, very curious. I am not seeing any bleeding. I'm gonna add a little bit of some dish soap. And so pretty much I will rinse out the soap, put this through my spin dryer, and hang it up to dry. But I have to say, I love getting something so multicolored with just one color. That is something I really enjoy. To see if we can get Muck Green to break with dip dyeing, I weighed out 1 gram of our Muck Green acid dye and dissolved it with hot tap water in a unspecified volume of water. In this 8-quart stainless steel dedicated dye pot, I have 16 cups of water, and I am going to add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, and then we will add that dye that we just mixed. The dye bath is not yet warm, so after I pour in this dye and see, I can rinse out. Ooh, okay, so look at this. What we added in was definitely green. What is left in this cup is more blue. So the pigments are definitely dissolving at different rates, which means that if we don't see breaking with dip dyeing, we could potentially see breaking if we had a mixture of the dye and then poured it onto yarn. So that's something to consider. But anyway, I'm gonna let this heat up and then we will dip dye our yarn. Let's dip dye our yarn inside this Muck Green. I always say this, that I'm gonna try to go slow, but I really am trying. The reason why I like to try this on non-superwash yarn is that in general, the rates that colors absorb is a lot slower with non-superwash yarn, and so therefore if we're hoping to exaggerate the rates where different colors bind, we will have a better shot of that with non-superwash yarn. But I could also reduce the amount of acid that we have even more if need be. So the dye in the pan is getting lighter and lighter. It still seems very much like this green, even with it getting lighter. I'm not noticing a shift to becoming more blue, at least not yet. I find that certainly there are many acid dye colors that break, like Purple Pop is a really good example. But there's also just a lot of acid dyes that break with speckles, and it's not as dramatic as, say, food coloring with dip dyeing. So, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see breaking. I think with both this and the sea spray, I think that I'd like to try something where I pour the dye over it. There's many colors, like I think avocado is one, where I see the color shift as I add more water and as there is more time. The color is still feeling very green to me. But, you know, looking at this, the color is beautiful. I cannot say for sure. It almost looks like I could see something feeling fairly tonal, but I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of the yarn in at this point. Certainly whatever is left is fairly pastel. So we have beautiful dip dyed yarn. Do I see for sure dramatic breaking with the dip dyeing? No. Do we potentially have some breaking like within the dip dyeing? Maybe. It almost looks to me like on some sections in the yarn, there's some sections that are a little more green and a little more blue. But I think, I don't know if it's my imagination or not. So we will take a closer look. But anyway, I'm going to let this sit on low heat for 20 minutes. So I feel like I see some breaking here. I feel like I'm now seeing like a more blue in there, which was not present before we did this heat, and a lot more green and maybe some more yellow in various spots. The dye bath is just about cleared. I am going to turn off the heat and let this yarn cool off here in the dye pot, but I have not moved it from when I stopped filming until now, and I am intrigued. I do think we see some breaking, not from the dip dyeing, but from the kettling aspect. Interesting. There's a line of sunlight, but I definitely think I see some breaking now. I'm gonna go ahead and transfer the yarn into a rinse bath, but I just wanted to show that the water has cleared. And it's amazing, but this is something that is, I think, similar to what I see with some other colors. We'll look at it when it's dry, but it really does, and I'm trying to be gentle because I don't want to felt it. I think that there are probably some pigments in here that take a little longer to dissolve. And so that's why at the end, when we thought that we just had the green, that I'm now seeing a little bit more blue. But we'll see when everything dries, of course. I just added some clear dish soap. I'm not expecting any bleeding, but you never know. You never know. Yeah, there's no color coming out. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna rinse out the soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, and then hang it up to dry, and we will take a closer look. It is official. Muck green is so much fun to play with and dry. I did not think that this had broken, but it actually has broken. It is very subtle. You can feel it all the way through the yarn, but especially up here where we see more blue versus more yellows here, and those sections are similar hues. I mean, zooming in, it feels like I mixed and dyed it with two separate colors. It doesn't feel like it comes from the same mixture. I don't know if what I see in the deeper section is going to come through. I see strands that are more yellow and strands that are more blue. It almost feels like it's heathered. It has this dimension to it, and I regret now that for this video, I didn't just dye a semi-solid in this colorway, because I feel like a semi-solid would have some different hues in it, and that would be just very, very subtle breaking. But I don't think the camera is doing that justice. I mean, even here on this deepest end, I just feel this dimension in there that really excites me. There is no denying that we have breaking in our speckles. We absolutely see both yellow and blue, and then there definitely are some speckles that feel more green versus more of that sort of blue color. And then other spots where, you know, the yellow really makes an impact. This happens because this dye is a mixture of different pigments. And this one seems to be a more balanced mixture of these different pigments because we're seeing multiple different colors all over. There are some colors, like I believe forest green, where you mostly get deep green speckles, but then there's the occasional rogue yellow one. And that's just based on how the dyes are mixed together. And I don't know if they mix and remill it to sort of grind the fibers together or what, but some colors just break with speckling. But this one is fairly dramatic and I think is absolutely incredible. But what is a muck dye? This is a color that won't be reproduced by Dharma, that presumably occurred by a mixing error or maybe a development or something. They were trying to mix a certain color and it didn't, in the quality control, didn't turn out to be what they were trying to mix. And honestly, they could also make batches for fun, but I don't think they necessarily do that because sometimes they release multiple, sometimes it's only one, sometimes there's no new muck color released. I think that they really must be based on some kind of error or accidental color, and therefore it's not reproducible because if it's an error with the amount of a pigment they put into that mixture, then they don't necessarily know how much there was, and so therefore they can't reproduce it. It does feel unfortunate to do a deep dive into a color that is no longer available and won't be mixed again. But I think that, you know, you could try to make your own mucks out of some dye powder, and that could be a lot of fun. And I'm not sure about the timing of the release of this video, but I have certainly already filmed a live stream where I made my own Muck dye out of all 4D Jacquard acid dyes, mix them together to see what would happen, and I think those results will surprise you. So I will have that video linked down below. I absolutely intend to, well, with their released, buy Muck dyes in the future because it was just so much fun to play with. And I love, love, love pre-mixed colors. I love to do color mixing as well, but pre-mixed colors can just be a surprise sometimes. And it's so fun with things that break heavily with speckling to just see how it might behave very differently with different techniques. Which brings me to an important reminder. If there is a dye color that you love when you do a tonal technique on it, you're not necessarily going to get that hue with speckles. Things may break with speckles. And similarly, if you see something breaking with speckles, you're not necessarily going to see all those hues if you dip dye. When it's in solution, things might mix and still bind at similar rates. So breaking with dip dyeing doesn't necessarily mean you'll see breaking in speckles and vice versa. But it is just important to conceivably do a test with speckles before you use it in case you really don't want rogue specks of a color that you're not expecting. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this video, please let me know down in the comments if there are other pre-mixed acid dye colors you would like me to do a deep dive into like this. I believe so far I've done olive brown and sea spray with similar exploration. And I mean, certainly I've done other colors along the way as well. But if you like this comparison of dip dyed and speckles and want other colors, let me know what you'd like to see down below. And don't forget to subscribe and smash the bell and all of that jazz as well. If you love the ChemKnits content and want to support it, there are many ways you can do that. Engaging with these videos is the best way you can support the content, but I do also have a Patreon and an Etsy shop, so those are great other ways that you can support the content. You can find more details with the links that will be down in the video description. The well-distributed multicolor speckles has me really excited. Sometimes, I mean, I never really mind when colors break with speckling, but occasionally, if there's just a random hot pink speckle in a sea of brown or something, it can kind of throw you off a little bit and feel like an unintentional mistake. But mostly, I like to embrace these things that aren't always desired effects by people and embrace it and take advantage of it. And so I hope to continue to do that more in the future. But I suppose this all comes down to why sometimes when I'm dyeing yarn, I have a vision and a plan, but sometimes I like to see what the dye and the colors are doing on the yarn, and then I pivot because sometimes the colors just want to exist in a certain way, and that's just a really, really fun way to play. Thank you so much for watching.